As expected, Michigan basketball lost the regular season finale to Michigan State. Did not go well whatsoever. A little bit of fight in the second half. We're not going to talk about that because we're going to talk about the fight, the other little fight that happened in the second half, because I've just seen the social media, the classlessness and everything. The common denominator, Michigan's always involved in these antics. Let's talk about the Michigan State fracas here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And here we are. Yet another Michigan State incident, only rivaled lately by Michigan-Ohio State incidents. Just seems to be how things go nowadays. Can't escape it. It's almost like Bill Paxton said in Twister, you can't explain it, you can't predict it, except for it's the opposite. You can't explain it and you can predict it, because you always kind of know what's going to happen in these moments, right? Every single time, you know what's going to happen. You're going to have some Michigan people, whether it's football or basketball, doing something relatively innocuous. I don't care what Michigan State people say about all of that. We'll get into it too, but doing something relatively innocuous that provokes violent action. Now, this was the least of violent action we've seen across a lot of these different scenarios, from the two football things from 22 and 24, and as far as Michigan State is concerned, and as 2024 Ohio State is concerned, but it's always the same. And you can even throw in Penn State 2022, which was nothing other than some yelling, right? Like, that's all that was. And yet you hear rivals be like, Michigan's always the center of this. Well, because essentially Michigan State and Ohio State people cannot handle the slightest anything. This time, if you're living under a rock, what happened was you had two true freshmen standing at midcourt while a game was actively going on, and Trey Holloman comes and shoves them because they're standing on the Spartan logo and they want to have their quote, storied senior day tradition. So storied that it happens once a year. I didn't know about it as someone who's covered college basketball for 10 years, right? They say that everyone should know about it, right? Because it's their thing. Listen, no one knows about your little traditions. Just like you can't expect everyone to know every school's little traditions. Dusty May said after the game, and then reiterated again today in his press conference, that he was unaware of this. And the fact that it's happening during a game, while the game is active, tells you yet again who is right and who is wrong, right? Because your tradition does not start where the other team exists, right? Like, that was the 2018 Devin Bush thing. Michigan State ends up late to the stadium for their walkthrough. Michigan's already out there for pregame warmups. The field is not cleared. Spartans do their thing, and they sit there and complain because Devin Bush is standing there where they don't want him standing. It's the Happy Gilmore defense over and over and over again. Well, he shouldn't have been standing there. That's what this constantly is. He shouldn't have been standing there. And that is the case of this. This is the case of essentially the 2022 tunnel scenario with Jamon Green, except for he shouldn't have been walking there. With Colston Loveland, he shouldn't have been standing/talking there. Like, whether he was talking or not, we don't know, right? That's a he said, she said. Yet again, what happened to sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. In this culture, it is no longer that. Everything equals pain, right? Like, everything is like, I didn't understand the pain that was caused by me retweeting something or whatever. I don't understand the pain that was caused by Colston Loveland saying whatever he said in that moment, right? I don't believe Jamon Green said anything, knowing Jamon. And then you have this. The common denominator is not that Michigan's always involved. It's that other teams find reasons to throw hands when they play Michigan one way or the other. If it is such a sacred moment that you have to get in everyone to kiss the court, do it after the game, not while the game is going on. Not this we're going to keep fouling and subbing guys in and out and whatever, just so that everyone can come in during the game to kiss the court. The Michigan players have every right to stand there in the middle of the game. And I also would say they were blissfully unaware. Yet it turns into this whole thing of Michigan's so classless. How dare they? How dare they not respect us? Well, that's why they don't respect you. Because you throw a hissy fit when things don't go exactly your way. Do it after the game. You have no right in the game to hold your little traditions. And then when it doesn't go your way, you have no right to put your hands on someone else. For anyone who's going to sit there and say, well, what did you say about Juwan Howard and all of that? You can go back. I was not a fan of Juwan Howard laying his hands on anybody. Right? Like, it does not need to escalate to that point at all, ever, especially for something as silly and ridiculous as a couple guys were standing there. Take that out of the sports realm and put it into the real world. Who ends up getting charged? Is it the Michigan guys who were standing there, or is it the Spartan who went and put his hands on a couple guys? The tunnel incident, who ends up getting charged? The Ohio State scenario. They planting a flag. Like, you can't actually plant the flag in the turf, right? They're just holding a flag there. And yet, they were attacked. It's not that Michigan is doing anything. And you can say they provoked or whatever. Okay, well, be above it. And if you're not Ohio State, but if you're Michigan State, you won the game. You won the Big Ten. Just have your celebration afterwards when they're not out there. Because isn't that the whole thing? Isn't that what the whole tunnel thing was? Is, excessive celebration, all that kind of stuff. Have your celebration afterwards when they're not around. That way you don't have to worry about Michigan guys standing on your court at all. Not even a little bit. They're off the court. Have your little kiss the floor, which is unsanitary. But nonetheless, it's one of your traditions. Have it then. You don't need to have it while those guys are on the court. So what that does is it just brings up, like, they hate the moniker little brother. Yet they keep on acting in ways that are very little brother-esque. And this is another example of it. Let's continue along this train of thought. Let's do so here in just a moment. But before we do, get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Well, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always get to talk to a real person. And for trade pros there looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now guess what? It is your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, we're going to continue on here in just a moment, but before we do, your home should reflect your style, and with Wayfair, it's easier than ever to make that happen. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh or tackling a big home project, Wayfair has everything you need in one place. Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find the perfect piece, no matter your space or budget. From cozy furniture and stylish decor to kitchen essentials and outdoor must-haves, Wayfair has it all at prices that fit your budget. I honestly can't wait to put on the sheets. I'm switching from my fleece sheets to my Wayfair sheets now that it's warmer. You can find that perfect piece. You looking for new sheets to make my bed cooler? Wayfair had so many stylish and comfortable options at great prices, and it's more than just furniture. I was surprised to find everything from storage solutions to patio decor, making it my go-to for all things home. So head over to wayfair.com and find something that's just your style today. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, so it's funny to see the Buckeyes jump to the Spartans' defense. Those two really are kindred spirits, and it's because hate rules their heart. Now, here's what makes it absurd in so many ways, is that type of stuff. I'm not usually like that type of stuff has no place in sports type of guy. I kind of like, I enjoy the drama to some degree. I just don't enjoy the reactions that usually come from it. But like in a normal case scenario, you would look at it and you'd say, yeah, two young guys are just standing there and they come, like another guy comes up from the other team and just shoves them. You'd sit there and say, well, that's wrong. But sports makes all of that okay, depending on what color jersey you prefer. And, but it's gotten so ridiculous because everything is always classless. Everything is always the worst. And yet, like, you can't, it's like the Bible says, take the log out of your eye before you try to remove the speck from your brother's eye, right? That's the actual judge, lest ye not be judged. It isn't, it says, why do you try to remove the speck from your brother's eye when you have a log in your own? Well, that's kind of what this is in that case, right? The constant battle cry against Michigan and the quote classlessness when the provocateur in most of these cases are actually the ones who are out there actually throwing hands one way or another. Whether in this case it was pretty minor, it was just some shoving. The last football game, as far as Michigan State, it was pretty minor, despite what Spartans like to try to create these narratives of things that happen that no one seems to have seen or have gotten on camera. No medical reports have been released or anything of that nature. It's a perpetual state of victimhood that they want to be under, yet they're the ones who are always provoking everything in terms of actually getting involved with their hands, right? In no other circumstance would we look at this and say that is normal behavior, but it happens with Michigan State, and now it's starting to happen with Ohio State because their hatred overrules any kind of sense of decency. And just some of the things that you see people saying online, I'm talking about the daily MSUs of the world, not to give a shout out to them. It ends up transcending any common sense of humanity. And is that really what we want to be? Right? Like F words and epithets thrown towards entire swaths of teams and fan bases because you just don't like them in terms of a sports thing. Like, it's absolutely absurd. And I understand I'm speaking probably to the choir to some degree because there's probably just as much of you out there that also are not fans of people who root for those other teams either, right? Like, now, that's not everybody. I know a lot of people who live in Ohio or live, near East Lansing. And I think it's a little bit more common in this state to just be, being able to share a state. But at the same time, there's plenty of people that they wouldn't save the life of someone who's a rival fan because it's gotten to be that vitriolic, and it's absolutely absurd. It's beyond absurd. Like, you need to have a little bit of humanity. Number one, it's ridiculous just to see how much sports rivalries have gotten to that place where it's fine to see a guy being beaten with a helmet if he's on your rival, right? Like, that's ridiculous. It's fine to see people of both sides being pepper sprayed because one team couldn't handle another team holding a flag at midfield, essentially. Even though it happened 2 years earlier with no issues, right? It happened with no issues when Baker Mayfield did it at Ohio Stadium, but because it's Michigan, because it was your birthright, all of that stuff. So the weird thing is because with Michigan having so many rivals, less so Notre Dame, but there were a lot of years, certainly in my formative years, Michigan played three big rivals every year, and not any Michigan fan could come to a consensus as to what the order of the pecking order of the rivalries were. I think pretty much everybody, for the most part, would say Ohio State. But I mean, I grew up where it was more Michigan State because it was more accustomed that they were going to beat Ohio State, no matter how good Ohio State was. I have some friends that I went to Michigan with that hate Notre Dame. And I use the term hate loosely, but they hate Notre Dame above the other two, or at least they did when I was in school in the mid 2000s. So because of that, Michigan fans, you tend to not necessarily harbor quite as much hate, but certainly it's starting to get to that point because you have two teams that just cannot control themselves when it comes to your school. Now, rise above that. I would urge you and beckon you to do. Don't just sit there and take that bait. Rise above that. And if you're a Michigan State fan or an Ohio State fan, hate watching this, rise above it yourself. Recognize that it doesn't need to be like this. And to sit there and say, well, those guys were standing there, therefore they deserved everything that was coming to them. Just take a step back and think about what you're saying or thinking and recognize how ridiculous that is. And you can sit there and say, like, I saw Michigan State people saying a bunch of like nasty things about Dusty May, who's said multiple times now he was unaware of this tradition. Now, again, why would he necessarily know about all of it? Like, just to hate your rival, you don't need to know about all of their traditions, right? Like, you just don't, right? Like, I don't know all of Michigan State or Ohio State's traditions on either in any of the major sports, right? Like, I know of some of them. I don't know about all of them. That's just disingenuous to start to make it into like, you have to know every single thing about us, including the fact that in the last regular season game at Breslin Center, which, by the way, Michigan does not always play the last regular season game at Breslin Center, that they would know about this relatively niche tradition, because it is niche. This isn't something Michigan State does every game when you play at Breslin Center. This isn't something they do against every team. It's something that they do on one particular day once a year. So just sit there and say, like, you have no ability to be ignorant of this is just absolutely asinine. And it's hilarious that MSU fans are so up in arms, because you can sit there and say the most common denominator is that Michigan's involved in these things. Well, who are they most often involved in these things against? You, right? Devin Bush didn't just go and start cleating up the Spartan logo at midfield unprovoked. And it was, again, it was a harmless act. What did it damage? Nothing. You play on grass. It gets repaired every single week. It did zero damage in terms of actual, like, oh man, now we got to figure out how to replace this. Well, it was going to be replaced the next week, because that's just what happens when you play on a grass field, right? It doesn't stay pristine over the course of a football game. He did it because y'all had to keep your tradition, even though you were late and Michigan players were already out there doing their thing, right? They were already out there doing the thing that they were allowed to do, which was be involved in pregame warmups. You fast forward to 2022 football, right? Like a Michigan player is allowed to walk to the locker room whenever he wants, or at least he used to be able to, without getting maliciously attacked by the other team. You fast forward to 2024 football. Teams talk a lot of trash all the time, both sides. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right to rush across the victory formation to put your hands on somebody, right? And then this, like, just be honest with yourself about your complicity in all of these situations, because you are complicit. You are not these, like, I don't know, innocent lamb sitting there, and poor Michigan, poor us, because Michigan guys were standing there. Think about that. Again, it's the Happy Gilmore thing. Shouldn't have been standing there. We're going to continue on, and we're going to do so here in just a moment. But before we do, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple and easy to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around, so visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, I want to talk a little basketball, but to finish up here, what's more classless? Is it not being able to take two guys standing there so much that you have to go and shove them? And you can say you're defending your court and whatever, but like, again, just if you want to talk sportsmanship is actually doing it after the game, doing it when, the game is not literally happening. I'm not talking figurative here. We're talking literally happening. Game is still literally happening. Or you could go to the side like the guy who did it before you, right? That he did it without any problem before Trey Holloman came up. But what's actually classless is taking things to violence, and I understand this is low level violence, right? But taking, it's still violence, right? If that happened on the street, that's an assault charge. Taking things to violence, just because you're not getting your way because a guy's standing where you don't want him to stand, right? Your rights to your traditions end where Michigan players exist, right? You don't like that they exist in a certain space that they are allowed to be in. Your right to celebrate the way you want to ends right then. And if it was anything that wasn't sports, you'd look at it the same way. And for you to look and say that it is classless for those two players to be standing there to not kowtow to the tradition that they had no idea existed beforehand. They're freshmen who've never played there before, who aren't exactly also well-versed in your own lore. So why would they? Now, if they came out and said, yeah, we knew that they were doing that and we just wanted to keep them, we knew this was a tradition and we wanted to keep them from doing it and we weren't going to let them do it, that might be a little bit of a different story, but that's just not what it is. And regardless, it comes to the hands and all of that. It's the excuse that you guys have if you're an MSU fan or an Ohio State fan with the flag and all of that stuff. It's to make yourself feel like you have some kind of moral superiority where you have absolutely none. Really. But let's talk basketball for a second in general. It is disappointing to see how Michigan's faltered down the stretch, has not looked like the same team since MSU kind of stole her soul at Chrysler Center in the second half. But here's where the good news is, I think, is that with almost a full week, Michigan being the 3 seed in the, and having to wait for whoever its opponent's going to be on Friday, I think that at least helps. Weirdly, I think this situation might help because it might tell Michigan that they've got to be a little bit tougher and, be a little bit more aggressive. And I mean, that's not necessarily going to help the ball control, the ability to not just hand the ball over to the opponent and say, I can sense that you would like to go the other way on the court. Here's the ball for you, please. I do think that it will help, at least from a mentality standpoint. Michigan's got to show something here because 3 games in a row to finish out the regular season, not great. But certainly ending on that note kind of tells you that, okay, that's the type of thing that should fire a team up. Get that win on Friday. I mean, you don't want to see him be an early exit, but get that win on Friday. Hopefully, it's hard to say Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's a hard road, especially because they may or may not be facing teams that they've lost to. On Friday, the worst case scenario for Michigan is to face a Purdue team that got blown out by in West Lafayette and then ended up beating in Ann Arbor. I think actually is Illinois in that bracket. I don't remember all of a sudden, but nonetheless, I think that it's get that win on Friday, take your chance on Saturday, just do something. Get ready for the tournament. Now, the tournament's what really matters now, but you need to build some confidence. You don't want to go into the tournament with 4 straight losses. You just can't do it at this point. And it is disappointing for how exciting this team had been all year, right? Like, even though it hadn't always exactly been pretty, because it just seemed like there was a script that you knew that Michigan was going to follow any given game. It was they're going to jump out to a really massive lead. And then at some point, either late in the first half or early in the second, you're going to look at it and say, how did they squander that lead? They're in a dogfight for a while. And then before long, they pull away just enough to be able to win the game. And then lately, they just haven't been able to get anything going. The shooting has been atrocious, especially from outside. It just seems like they can't seem to get multiple contributors at all. This might be a good time, right, to have like a 5-day layoff or a 4-day layoff just to kind of recollect, and try to kind of figure some things out before you get to the tournament, which is a week and a half away. So I think that's good to have that. It's good to have this situation because it could fire the team up and kind of tell the team, like, we don't want to be on that end again. Now, we've seen enough from Michigan basketball this year to know that it is capable of making runs. The only thing is for the last 3 weeks, it's not been the same team. It's a team that struggled against Nebraska and Rutgers and then gets blown out by Illinois and Maryland and all of these teams, right? So they need to find something here. And it doesn't quite hold the same as when you're beating teams that are ranked that are no longer ranked, like the Oklahomas of the world, who was a highly ranked team when Michigan beat them, but now no longer is. you just got to figure out something. You need to see something more from Trey, because it's really disappointing to see like how he's just kind of been. He felt a lot more effective earlier in the year, and that kind of tells you that he's just kind of not the point guard of the future for Michigan, at least as it stands right now. But nonetheless, it's a time to regroup. We've seen Michigan do it before. Michigan wasn't in a completely dissimilar situation in 2017. I mean, it is in terms of there's no plane crash. But at the same time, like, you know, it was Michigan kind of limped into the Big Ten tournament, have some adversity, and then suddenly they win the whole thing, and then they make a small run in the NCAA tournament. So hopefully this will have that type of effect, but we'll see. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back on Tuesday. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.